Princess Leonor's crown moment Spain waited for. A morning of sunlight filters across the grand hall of the Palacio Real, gilded ceilings catching faint rays like a constellation mapped in gold. The air is still. Footsteps echo faintly along marble corridors that have felt centuries of power pass beneath them. This is not theater. It is authority made visible. National identity is woven into these rituals, each gesture calibrated, each pause deliberate. She moves with measured poise, the weight of inheritance resting invisibly on her shoulders. The crown she approaches is more than metal. It is the living thread of continuity, a silent witness to decades, centuries, of unbroken ceremony. For Princess Leonor of Spain, the crown is more than a symbol, it's the promise of a legacy centuries in the making. Today, the nation watches as duty and destiny converge in a moment Spain has long awaited. Across the globe, foreign capitals note the precision of these movements. In Washington, the alignment of monarchy and state is studied as an indicator of stability. London recalls its own ceremonial traditions, reading this as both mirror and measure. Ottawa, Canberra, Berlin, all see the careful choreography as a statement, deliberate and controlled. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. By the second minute, what seems straightforward begins to shift. The question is not who will wear the crown, but whether the crown will define her, or she the crown. Tradition has shaped her steps, but the eyes of history are unblinking. And yet, in the quiet, attention lingers, what is inherited is never fully certain. Every movement, every bow, every measured glance is underwritten by centuries of law, protocol, and expectation. Yet underneath the ceremony, currents of expectation and scrutiny swirl. Citizens and courtiers alike watch the unfolding with held breath. This is the mirror of power, immovable, yet intimately personal. The institution survives, but only if the air navigates the unseen pressures. Something unresolved lingers in the corridors. The crown waits, yes, but it is not simply a reward. It is a test of endurance, of focus, of comprehension of responsibility that extends beyond borders. This is the quiet mystery that accompanies visible majesty, a challenge with no script. By the 10th minute, the weight of the institution presses in ways that cannot be rehearsed. Questions of succession, of public confidence, of interpretation of duty, all converge silently. A momentary misstep is not merely personal, it ripples through centuries of legitimacy. The palace becomes both stage and tribunal, and she stands at the intersection of continuity and scrutiny. The point of no return arrives not with fanfare but in the stillness of recognition. History does not wait. Laws do not hesitate. The crown will not pause for hesitation. Duty outweighs desire. And yet, in that tension, there is the quiet promise of leadership, a sovereign measured not by instinct, but by enduring comprehension of power's architecture. Safe foreshadowing of external pressures emerges as she ascends. The United States notes the ceremonial steadiness as a sign of institutional resilience. The United Kingdom evaluates the nuance of ceremony against centuries of their own monarchy. Germany measures stability. Australia and Canada watch as heirs are tested before the eyes of history, as symbols of continuity assert themselves against the subtle, shifting politics of modernity. And still, as the crown settles, as the nation exhales in recognition, there is an unspoken awareness, the story is far from complete. Authority has been asserted, duty has been observed, but the future is not yet written. Across the plazas and chambers, the silence. Whispers of challenges to come, of interpretations yet to crystallize, of history watching with an unyielding gaze. The crown, heavy yet poised, marks a moment, not a conclusion. The weight is born, the legacy continues, but the question of what comes next hangs in the air like a distant bell tolling across centuries. The nation has waited, the world has watched, and in that stillness, the edge of history waits patiently. The day unfolds with deliberate calm. Outside, the streets of Madrid are quiet but watchful, the banners fluttering gently in the morning breeze. Citizens, diplomats, and dignitaries move along invisible lines of protocol, each step reinforcing the architecture of continuity. Every gesture is a note in a centuries-long symphony of power, no one acts without understanding that history is observing. Within the palace, she pauses before the great mirror. In that reflection is more than her own image. It is the weight of expectations, the projection of a nation, the unbroken line of monarchs who came before. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. Every movement is a signal, every glance an assertion of readiness. Her advisors offer quiet guidance, a reminder that authority is structural. Decisions are anticipated, outcomes measured, consequences far-reaching. The crown she will inherit is not simply a symbol of prestige, it is the mechanism through which law, tradition, and national identity converge. To wear it is to hold the living thread of governance, to balance ceremony with sovereignty, ceremony with responsibility. Yet even in this orchestrated calm, tension threads through the room. Questions surface, deliberate and unspoken. How will her generation interpret this legacy? Will the structures that have endured centuries bend to modern scrutiny? And beyond Spain, how will the world, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Germany, read these gestures, these choices, this embodiment of continuity? Every eye, domestic and international, is attuned to nuance. A small tilt of the head, a measured pause, the exact cadence of a greeting, all communicate stability or strain. This is the quiet, potent power of ritual, it reassures and it tests. The crown awaits, and so does the question that history does not answer aloud. Will the heir shape the crown, or will the crown shape her? The living thread of continuity continues, taut and unbroken, yet stretched across a new century. Would you like me to continue with the third part, where the narrative deepens into the institutional stakes and subtle global interpretations? The corridors of the palace hum with subtle energy. Courtiers move with exacting precision, invisible lines of authority guiding every step. This is power made structural, impersonal, unyielding, yet intimate in its observation. Every protocol observed reinforces the lesson: survival of the institution is the ultimate prize, and no personal impulse may override it. She stands at the threshold of the hall where the crown will be presented. The room is immense, every gilded panel and frescoed ceiling a reminder that national identity is woven into these rituals. The walls themselves seem to lean in, silent witnesses to centuries of transition, of continuity tested and reaffirmed. Every precedent is alive here, every past decision echoing in the weight of the moment. Across the globe, foreign capitals watch for signals as much as for ceremony. In Washington, the steadiness of her movements is read as a measure of political and institutional stability. London's analysts trace the echoes of centuries-old monarchy, comparing cadence, posture, and poise. Berlin and Ottawa observe subtle signs of discipline, the careful choreography of power. Canberra notes the resilience of hereditary continuity in a modern democratic world. These are not mere spectators, they are interpreters of legitimacy, weighing what they see against their own frameworks of authority. Yet something remains deliberately unspoken. The crown is a test, not just of ceremony, but of comprehension, judgment, and endurance. The questions that history asks are never voiced aloud. Can she sustain the invisible weight that succession demands? Can continuity remain unbroken when generations change and scrutiny intensifies? The first tensions of expectation press upon her subtly, almost imperceptibly. Advisors whisper, courtiers adjust, the air shifts. Every second stretches longer, every gesture carries meaning beyond its immediate appearance. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, in poised resilience, in the understanding that the institution will outlast any individual, yet depends upon each one to sustain it. The crown waits, and with it, the unspoken challenge. The future is present, heavy with history, and she steps forward fully aware that duty is both a privilege and a trial. If you like, I can craft the fourth part, where the first rhetorical cliffhanger builds and the stakes of public expectation and internal strain escalate. The hall falls into near silence as she advances. Each step is deliberate, measured, a cadence inherited through centuries of precedent. The courtiers' eyes follow, not in curiosity, but in disciplined witness. Every movement reinforces the truth. Power is structural, not personal, authority is observed, not conferred lightly. The crown rests atop its velvet cushion, catching the light in quiet brilliance. It is heavy, not in weight alone, but in consequence. To lift it is to inherit the living thread of continuity, to embody law, duty, and national identity in a single, visible gesture. The audience, both domestic and international, understands this implicitly. In London, analysts note the precision of ceremony. Washington interprets every motion as a signal of institutional credibility. Berlin, Canberra, Ottawa, all read these subtle acts as proof of enduring legitimacy. Yet beneath the controlled choreography, attention sharpens. Tradition demands composure, yet the world waits, impatient for signs of character, decisiveness, and resolve. Continuity is not abstract here, it is tested in real time, in the poise of the air, in the quiet acknowledgement that history will judge the weight of each choice. Something unresolved lingers in the atmosphere, a subtle awareness that the crown is both culmination and threshold. The nation has watched generations pass, but the present carries questions that have never been fully answered. How will the structures bend under modern scrutiny? Will ceremony alone suffice to communicate authority? The answers remain deliberately unspoken, held in the hush of observation, in the rhythm of restraint. Every breath counts. Every heartbeat echoes in the gilded expanse. A slight misstep, a hesitation, could ripple outward, not as scandal, but as signal, registering across courts and capitals, subtly reshaping interpretations of stability, of legacy, of succession. The first cliffhanger emerges quietly, almost imperceptibly. The crown can be inherited, but the crown also tests. And in this moment, the weight of expectation is not simply ceremonial, it is existential for the institution, poised on the edge between reverence and scrutiny. If you want, I can now continue with the fifth part, where the thumbnail hook is repeated and the stakes deepen dramatically, introducing the global perception and subtle political tension. She reaches the pedestal. The crown gleams, an artifact of law and lineage, centuries of continuity distilled into gold and jewels. Her hand hovers briefly, deliberate, controlled, acknowledging not herself, but the structure she now embodies. Every eye in the room is fixed, yet no movement is hurried. Duty outweighs desire. The weight of history is palpable. Across the world, capitals read this moment with subtle calculation. Washington interprets composure as a measure of national stability, a quiet reassurance of continuity. London notes the choreography, comparing it to centuries of its own monarchical precedent. Berlin, Ottawa, Canberra, all perceive the same signal. The institution endures, but only through discipline and recognition of its rules. Every gesture is a message, every pause a statement of legitimacy. Inside the palace, the tension deepens. Courtiers exchange restrained glances, advisors weigh what is spoken against what remains unsaid. The crown is no longer simply ceremonial. It is a test of understanding, judgment, and resilience. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, in the unbroken thread linking past and future. And yet, in the quiet sweep of this ritual, a deeper question emerges. The crown can be inherited, but authority is earned anew in every generation. Will the structures sustain the demands of modern scrutiny? Can the heir navigate the subtle pressures of expectation without compromising the institution itself? These are the challenges that have never been scripted, held instead in the hush of observation and the weight of tradition. The moment is suspended. The crown waits. The nation watches. And for the first time, the living thread of continuity feels both unbroken and fragile, tested by the passage of history and the gaze of the world. If you like, I can continue with the sixth part, where the narrative introduces mid-level institutional strain and foreshadows the first visible pressures on her reign. The crown settles at last, a silent testament to centuries of law, ceremony, and continuity. Its weight is both literal and symbolic, resting not on vanity or ambition, but on comprehension, discipline, and responsibility. The nation exhales, yet the quiet that follows is not closure. It is awareness, a recognition that authority has been asserted, duty observed, and history acknowledged, but that the story is far from finished. Beyond Spain, observers continue to measure, interpret, and reflect. Washington notes the demonstration of institutional resilience. London sees a choreography reaffirming legitimacy. Berlin, Canberra, and Ottawa read the same signal. Continuity endures, yet challenges remain on the horizon. Every global gaze is a reminder that power is never private, it is a covenant between a sovereign and the structures that sustain them. Even in triumph, the crown does not answer the questions that matter most. How will the heir navigate the unseen pressures of succession and expectation? How will modern scrutiny test the traditions that have survived centuries? The answers are not yet written. The moment is both culmination and threshold, a pause on the edge of possibility. For Princess Leonor of Spain, the crown is more than a symbol, it is the living thread of continuity, and she carries it into a future that has not yet been defined. The nation has waited, the world has watched, and in that quiet, poised tension, the next chapter of history is waiting to be claimed.